The message came at dawn, a quiet knock on an iron door deep inside Windsor's oldest guard wing. A royal guard, trained to protect rather than question, suddenly found himself holding a sealed envelope marked with Princess Kate's personal crest, and a command that could alter the balance inside the royal household. Why him? Why now? And why was Princess Anne the only one allowed to receive the code locked inside? In the next moments, duty would collide with secrecy, and one guard's loyalty would be tested in ways he never imagined. If you love real royal mysteries, unseen palace traditions, and stories that show the human side of Britain's most iconic family, you're in the right place. Tap like, hit subscribe, and share this with someone who enjoys a good royal twist. Ready? Let's get into it. But the palace wakes before the sun. Most people never notice this. Tourists see only the bright, polished version of royalty, but behind those historic walls, the real rhythm begins in the blue-gray minutes before dawn. And on this particular morning, Windsor Castle carried a tension so thin, so sharp, that even the veterans of the Royal Guard felt it in their bones. Thomas Hale, a guard with 6 years of service and a reputation for quiet reliability, was finishing his night rotation when a firm, deliberate knock echoed against the old oak door behind him. It wasn't the sound of an emergency alarm or a rushing supervisor. This knock was calm, steady, intentional, and that alone made it unusual. He turned. A palisade, older woman with silver-rimmed glasses stood waiting, her expression unreadable. She wasn't the type sent to deliver trivial messages. Without speaking, she held out a small, sealed envelope. The wax crest on it was unmistakable. Catherine, Princess of Wales. Thomas's heart kicked once, hard. Royal Guards train for everything: evacuations, breaches, medical emergencies, yet nothing trains you for the moment when a senior royal sends for you personally. Guards protect, they don't participate. They follow, they don't interpret. But this envelope, this was different. It wasn't marked as ceremonial, nor as part of palace protocol A or B. This was personal, direct, and delivered under the quiet anonymity of dawn. For you, the aide said softly. You're to take it to Princess Anne immediately. Thomas blinked. Princess Anne, ma'am? Yes, and no one else. A slight pause. You're to keep this confidential. Her tone didn't allow for questions, yet his mind buzzed with them anyway. Why him? Most guards went entire careers without being personally assigned by a royal. And the Princess Anne, detail one of the most respected, straightforward royals in the entire family, was typically routed through designated channels, not improvised at sunrise. Still, the rules of service were simple. Except first, question never. Yes, ma'am, he replied, sliding the envelope into the inner pocket of his ceremonial jacket. The moment he touched it, he noticed something strange. The envelope felt heavier than expected almost, as if reinforced. Inside, he couldn't hear parchment. No soft flutter, no shifting weight. Whatever was inside was solid, deliberate. He stepped out into the corridor, boots striking the polished stone floors with soft, disciplined echoes. The castle felt different today. Guards nodded at him, but their eyes lingered a second longer than normal, as if they sensed he was carrying something more significant than routine documents. The palace may run on centuries of tradition, but instinct travels faster than information. As Thomas moved toward the eastern wing, he couldn't help but notice how quiet the halls were. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the tight-held breath of a place expecting something. A faint tension clung to the air, like dust before a storm. He kept his pace controlled. Royal Guards weren't permitted to rush unless specifically ordered. But inside, his adrenaline marched steadily. He replayed the aide's expression in his mind. No fear, just urgency. And under that, something else. Protective concern for the Princess of Wales. Or Princess Anne. Or the institution itself. What could possibly require a secret code exchanged between two senior royals at dawn, outside protocol, and through him? His training told him not to speculate. His humanity made it impossible not to. He passed through the inner courtyard where the sky was still a pale wash of early morning. The chill hit his face, grounding him. Across the stones, the Union flag fluttered softly, steady, dignified, unshaken. Yet Thomas felt every step pull him deeper into a part of royal life most never see, the private machinery behind public calm. As he approached the restricted wing housing Princess Anne's private office, 2 guards stepped forward. "Authorization?" one asked. Thomas presented the envelope. Both guards stiffened slightly at the crest, not shock recognition. They knew the symbol. They also knew they weren't allowed to question it. "You may proceed," the taller guard said, stepping aside. "She's expecting you." Expecting him? That detail cut through his thoughts like a clean blade. Princess Anne punctual, disciplined. Famously no nonsense, didn't expect people unless someone alerted her in advance. Meaning Princess Kate had coordinated this quietly, quickly, and without drawing attention. Which meant this wasn't just a routine family message. It was intentional and urgent. Thomas knocked once on the door of the Princess Royal's private briefing room.
"Enter,"
came Anne's voice, calm, clipped, unmistakably composed. He stepped inside. Princess Anne stood near the window, dressed not for public engagement, but for work. Dark blazer, hair neat, eyes sharp with focus, honed from decades of duty. She wasn't reading. She wasn't writing. She was simply waiting. Thomas approached and presented the sealed envelope with both hands, bowing his head. "Your Royal Highness, a personal message from the Princess of Wales,"
and
delivered as instructed.
Her expression barely
it.
shifted.
Her
Yet there was
expression
something
barely
in her
shifted.
eyes.
Yet there was something in her
Thomas had
eyes,
seen
an
only during
alertness
high
Thomas had
security
seen
rehearsals.
only during
She
high
broke the
security
wax seal
rehearsals.
quietly, slid out a small laminated card. Thomas saw only a glimpse, a column of numbers, letters, and what looked like access identifiers. A code, and exhaled slowly. A single measured breath. Not fear, recognition. "Very good," she murmured. "Tell me, were you stopped?" Question. "No, ma'am." "Did anyone see the seal?" "Only the guards at the entrance, ma'am." She nodded once. Efficient. Catherine chose well. The word stunned him. Chose well? Catherine, Princess Kate, had chosen specifically? Out of hundreds of guards, each with impeccable credentials, and tucked the card into her blazer and gave him a look that was both grateful and burdened. "You've done your duty precisely," she said. "What comes next is not for public record." Her voice softened, barely but noticeably. "And for what it's worth, today, your discretion protected more than you know. The palace is grateful." A faint weight lifted from Thomas's chest. Yet curiosity remained, alive, restless, impossible to silence. As he left the room and locked the door behind him, that single click echoed louder than any alarm. Something had shifted inside the palace. And Thomas Hale, ordinary guard, invisible figure in a centuries-old institution, had just played a role in a moment no one would ever announce to the world. Not yet, not ever, if everything went according to plan. But deep within the stone walls of Windsor, a royal secret had begun to move. The corridor outside Princess Anne's briefing room felt different the moment Thomas stepped back into it. Quieter, heavier, as though the castle itself understood that a line had just been crossed. Even the air felt denser, carrying a subtle weight that made his breath slow without him noticing. What had he just delivered? What kind of code required two of the most respected women in the royal family to operate outside standard channels? Thomas straightened his shoulders, reminding himself of the first rule of the royal guard. You do not interpret the monarchy. You protect it. And yet, questions tugged at him like threads loosening from a tightly woven uniform. As he moved down the corridor, the castle stretched out around him in its familiar, majestic quiet. Portraits of past monarchs watching, chandeliers hanging like frozen constellations, every shadow disciplined and still. Normally, this silence was a comfort. Today, it felt like someone had lowered the volume on the world to reveal a second hidden layer beneath. Just past the long tapestry hall, Thomas noticed two guards speaking in hushed voices near the armor display. Something guards almost never did while on duty. When they spotted him, both fell silent. It wasn't suspicion. It was recognition. They had seen him enter a part of the palace that only a handful were ever allowed into at that hour. He nodded to them, keeping his expression neutral. The unspoken rule in moments like this was simple. If someone was carrying royal business, you did not ask. You simply observed and stepped aside. But their eyes lingered just long enough to confirm what Thomas already knew. Word was spreading to the palace's unspoken network. Something unusual was happening. The main corridor leading toward the central guard post felt impossibly long, the historic stone floor echoing with each controlled step. Thomas could sense the centuries beneath him. Kings and queens, crises and triumphs, secrets delivered in the shadows long before he existed. He felt, in a strange way, connected to all of it, but connection wasn't clarity. Reaching the end of the corridor, he paused at a junction where the public and private wings met. A staff member hurried past, her face unusually pale for someone working the morning shift. "Everything all right?" he asked instinctively. She startled a little, then forced a small smile. "Yes, just early start." Her answer was too quick, too practiced. She rushed off before he could reply. Thomas continued toward the guard room. But before he could reach the door, a familiar voice called from behind him. "Thomas, a moment." He turned to see Captain Lennox, his commanding officer, approaching. Lennox was known for being direct, efficient, and allergic to small talk. Seeing him in the private wing this early meant something was definitely out of routine. "Sir," Thomas said, standing straighter. Lennox's gaze flicked to the inside pocket of Thomas's jacket, the same pocket that held Princess Kate's sealed message less than half an hour earlier. "You delivered it?" Lennox asked quietly. "Yes, sir." "And Princess and received it personally?" "Yes, sir." Lennox nodded once, jaw tightening with mixture of relief and tension. "Good. You're not to discuss the matter with anyone. Not staff, not other guards, not even those of your rank." The captain rarely repeated himself. Repetition meant severity. "Understood, sir." Lennox's expression softened just a fraction. This wasn't regular protocol. "But we trust you." Thomas felt a strange mix of pride and unease. He had served loyally for years, yet he'd never been singled out for something so sensitive. The captain gave him a final nod and walked away, leaving Thomas standing in the center of the corridor, surrounded by centuries of silence. As he resumed his walk, he passed through the south wing, where narrow staircases spiraled like coiled secrets. The castle always felt older here, colder stones, deeper shadows, a sense that history watched from the corners. Halfway down the corridor, he nearly collided with Malcolm, another guard who had joined the service the same year as Thomas. Usually cheerful, Malcolm looked unusually tense today. "What's going on?" Malcolm whispered the moment they were close enough. The shifts were rearranged without notice. They restricted movement in the East Wing. And now they're saying the Princess Royal is holding an unscheduled meeting. Thomas kept his voice steady. "I'm not clear to comment." Malcolm nodded, a touch disappointed, but he respected the boundaries. "Just feels like something's up, bigger than usual." Thomas offered him the faintest reassuring look before continuing on. But Malcolm wasn't wrong. Something was up, and the castle seemed to feel it too. As he approached the usually lively inner service corridor, Thomas noticed something even stranger: the sound of radios. Not loud chatter, not bustle movement, but short, clipped transmissions. Operational, not routine. A signal of heightened sensitivity. He passed the door slightly ajar and caught a glimpse of two staff members reviewing documents with unusual urgency. "She said it has to be done today. No delays," one whispered. "And if the code doesn't match," the other murmured. Thomas froze. The code. He stepped quickly away before they noticed him listening. He knew better than to linger near conversations outside his clearance. Still, what he heard added a new layer to the mystery. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't symbolic. Whatever Princess Kate had sent, it had to match something. The thought followed him as he moved toward the guard quarters. Every corridor felt heavier. Every glance from staff told him that uncertainty had seeped through the palace like mist. But the moment that truly made him pause came when he passed through the royal gallery. Standing near the far window was a figure Thomas recognized instantly: Lord Ashcombe, one of the senior private secretaries. A man who rarely left the administrative wing. Ashcombe wasn't speaking. He wasn't writing. He was simply staring out the window toward the east tower with contemplative, troubled expression. Thomas slowed just enough to observe. Ashcombe was a man who read situations ahead of others. If he was uneasy, something real was unfolding behind the scenes. A moment later, Ashcombe quietly walked away, leaving the window empty, except for the distant reflection of Thomas himself. He continued forward, mind racing despite his disciplined attempt to stay neutral. The palace had rules to prevent speculation, yet human instinct rarely obeyed protocol. Every detail pointed towards something involving security, something the public couldn't know yet, something the royal family was handling internally. Quietly, decisively, he finally reached the guardroom, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. Silence. Not the usual morning chatter, not the soft clatter of boots being polished. Just silence. Half a dozen guards sat in their places, all unusually tense, all glancing toward the door as though waiting for news. Thomas took his seat. Every eye flicked toward him, curious but disciplined. He offered nothing, because he knew nothing. And yet, he had delivered the first piece of whatever puzzle was unfolding around them. A secret code from Princess Kate to Princess Anne. A dawn delivery with no explanation. Staff whispering about verification. Increased radios. Restricted wings. Senior secretaries pacing. The silent halls of Windsor were holding their breath. And Thomas Hale, still just one guard among many, felt the weight of that silence settle on his shoulders. He didn't yet know that by nightfall, the palace would face a moment no one had prepared for, and the code he delivered would become the key. By midday, the tension inside Windsor Castle had shifted from quiet unease to something sharper, an undercurrent of urgency that ran beneath every polished hallway and whispered exchange. Thomas felt the way a sailor feels a change in the wind before a storm. Subtle but unmistakable. He had completed his rotation and was now assigned to the West Gallery, a post normally calm and uneventful. Today, however, footsteps echoed more frequently. Senior staff moved faster, and guards were being repositioned with unusual precision. Even the palace's radio system, normally a steady rhythm of routine instructions, had turned into clipped, coded messages. Something, undeniably, was unfolding. Thomas remained in his position, gaze steady, posture rigid, but internally, he kept replaying the moment Princess and opened that envelope, the quiet recognition in her eyes, the seriousness in her voice, the way she had locked the door behind him. Whatever was on that laminated card, those numbers, those letters, it was no simple ceremonial token. It was part of something bigger, something the palace had been preparing for long before dawn broke. Around 2 o'clock, a member of the internal communications team hurried by carrying a folder marked with a red stripe, an indicator of restricted clearance. She clutched it so tightly her knuckles had turned white. When she passed him, Thomas noticed something else, the slightest tremble in her hands. He'd seen fear before, in training scenarios, in crisis rehearsals. But fear inside the palace walls, among senior staff, that was rare. Moments later, Captain Lennox approached him again, his expression darker than that morning. "Hale," he said quietly, "your presence is required in the East Administrative Wing. Now!" Thomas nodded and followed him into the service corridor. They walked quickly, boots striking stone in tight rhythm. The corridor narrowed, then widened again as they reached the restricted offices reserved for senior operations. Inside one of the rooms, several people stood around a long oak table, advisors, security chiefs, and at the center, Lord Ashcombe, the same man Thomas had seen staring out the window earlier. Ashcombe's expression was composed, but his eyes carried the weight of the past several hours. "Guard Hale," Ashcombe said as Thomas entered. "You delivered the Princess of Wales's message directly to the Princess Royal, correct?" "Yes, sir." "And it remained sealed until she opened it?" "Yes, sir." Ashcombe exchanged a glance with one of the security heads, an older man with silver hair and the rigid posture of someone forged in military intelligence. "Good," the security chief said. "That confirms chain integrity." Chain integrity. The phrase alone confirmed Thomas's growing suspicion. This wasn't about a ceremony, a charity initiative, or even an internal family matter. This was about security. Ashcombe gestured for Thomas to step closer. On the table lay a small display case, transparent and reinforced. Inside it, Thomas saw something unexpected, a sleek, silver device no larger than a phone, but with no buttons, no visible screen. just a thin edge where a card could be inserted. The chief tapped the case gently. "This device," he said, "activates one of the palace's internal emergency systems. A system rarely used, never publicized, installed decades ago for contingencies that would require discreet and immediate communication between senior royals." Thomas held his breath, listening. "For the last 48 hours," the chief continued, "there has been concern involving a breach attempt. Not of physical space, but of digital access." Thomas felt the temperature in the room seem to drop. The attempt targeted the archival servers. Specifically, a set of protocols that connect to the private communications system established for senior members of the family. He understood immediately. Someone had tried to access internal royal communication networks. That meant someone outside, or possibly inside. The system wanted information that should never be touched. Lord Ashcombe spoke next, his voice calm but edged with frustration. "The Princess of Wales maintains a rotating encryption key for her correspondence with the Princess Royal. It is not stored digitally. It is updated physically on a card every few months." Thomas realized it instantly. The code, the laminated card he saw briefly in Princess's hand, was the encryption key. The only way to verify or reset the secure communication link between the two women when the breach attempt was detected. The security chief continued. It triggered a protocol requiring immediate verification between the system controllers. Her Royal Highness Catherine initiated the procedure. Ashcombe nodded, finishing the explanation, and the card you delivered confirmed that the line between them remains uncompromised. Thomas absorbed the weight of those words. The message he carried, not knowing what it contained, had been far more critical than he imagined. Without it, the security team wouldn't have been able to confirm whether the system's integrity was intact. Without it, the palace might have had to shut down internal channels entirely, causing confusion and potentially exposing vulnerabilities. "Princess and confirmed the match," Ashcombe said. "The system is secure. The attempt failed." But he wasn't finished. "The reason you were chosen," Ashcombe added, "was because your schedule placed you in the exact corridor needed. Your clearance is high enough not to trigger suspicion, and your record shows impeccable conduct." Catherine needed someone who could move discreetly, without drawing attention. Thomas felt a strange rush of pride. Quiet, modest, but solid. Still, a question lingered. "Sir, do we know who attempted the breach?" Ashcombe exchanged another glance with the chief. Their silence spoke volumes. "We have strong leads," the chief finally said, "but until verification is complete, we will exercise discretion." Translation: they didn't know yet, or they couldn't reveal it. Both possibilities were unsettling. Lennox stepped forward. "You did well today, Hale. Better than you know. But until further notice, you're not to share this with anyone." Thomas nodded. "Understood." The meeting ended shortly after. Staff dispersed quickly, urgency still guiding their steps. Thomas walked back through the palace with a new understanding of the weight he had carried. Not just a message, not just a code, but a safeguard for the one system designed to protect private communication between two of the most influential women in the royal household. As he passed through the grand staircase, he saw a princess, and at the far end of the gallery, she was speaking quietly with a senior staffer, her posture composed, her expression steady. She noticed Thomas as he walked by and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Acknowledgement, respect, and something else, gratitude. He returned the gesture with a disciplined bow of the head. Evening light began to spill through the tall windows as Thomas resumed his station. The castle was still tense, still alert, but slowly settling now that the danger was contained. Yet one thought continued to echo through his mind. If this was only the beginning of an attempted breach, what might come next? And how prepared was the palace for a second attempt? One that might not fail. The hidden reason behind the code was no longer a mystery, but the threat behind it was just beginning to reveal itself. Evening settled over Windsor Castle with slow amber glow, softening the stone walls, but sharpening the unease still hanging inside them. The breach attempt had failed. Yes, the encrypted channel between Princess Kate and Princess, and had been confirmed. Yes, but the palace wasn't celebrating. The silence felt like the pause between two heartbeats, the moment when everyone wonders if the next one will strike harder. Thomas Hale stood at his post by the west stairwell, posture firm, eyes steady. But internally, he was replaying every moment of the day, every whisper, every glance, every sign that something deeper had been set in motion long before he ever touched that envelope. Then suddenly, hail, with me, Captain Lennox. Thomas stepped away from his station and followed. Lennox moved briskly, leading him toward a part of the castle few guards entered without explicit summons, the private strategy rooms of the Princess Royal. When they reached the heavy double doors, Lennox paused. "She requested you," he said quietly. "Only you." "Requested him? Twice in one day?" Before Thomas could process it, the doors opened. Princess and herself stood inside, not flanked by advisors, not surrounded by staff, but alone, hands clasped behind her back, her expression steady and deliberate. "Guard hail," she said. "Come in." He stepped inside. Lennox closed the doors behind him and moved to a map laid out on a central table. Not a map of the United Kingdom or the Commonwealth, but a layout of the inner palace systems, marked with discrete zones and lines representing communications channels. "Earlier today," she began, "we confirmed the authenticity of Catherine's code. That prevented an automatic shutdown of our secure network." Thomas nodded. "I was brief, ma'am," and looked up, her eyes meeting his with a clarity that made him straighten instinctively. "But what you were not told," she continued, "is that the breach attempt came closer than we admit publicly. The intruder reached a secondary firewall. One more step, and it would have triggered a full internal alert." Thomas felt his breath catch. If that alert had gone off and said, the system would have locked down, and every message, past and present, between senior royals would have been exposed for a brief but catastrophic moment before the shutdown completed. Exposed. The word struck him with full force. Private discussions, sensitive plans, personal matters, historical records, communications between the monarchy's most influential women. Princess Kate's code hadn't just been a verification key. It had been the final lock, securing a vault few people would ever know existed. "What we're dealing with," and continued, "is not a random attempt. This was targeted, precise, and performed by someone with substantial technical skill." Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest. "Ma'am, do we know who attempted it?" "We have 3 suspects," and said, "but none are confirmed. One external, one internal, one somewhere between." Somewhere between. An insider with outside access? A contractor with privilege clearance? Someone working quietly within the palace walls? And didn't elaborate. Instead, she turned fully toward Thomas. "You carried out your task with absolute discretion, more than many would. And because of that, I'm giving you something uncommon." Thomas swallowed. "Ma'am." Perspective. She motioned for him to step closer to the map. Thomas approached, attentive, respectful. "Most people," and said, "believe palace security is about guarding doors, windows, fences. They forget the most dangerous threats rarely walk through a gate." She pointed to a thin red line stretching between 2 secure nodes. They slipped through a system, a signal, a password. Her voice softened, not with fear but resolve. "Today, Catherine trusted you to carry something I could not request publicly. Not because you are a guard, but because you are reliable. You are overlooked. And sometimes the overlooked are the ones who hold the line." Thomas felt the word sink in, a mix of humility, pride, and the weight of responsibility he had unknowingly carried. Then and straightened. "There will be a second attempt." The room seemed to tighten. "We intercepted patterns, digital signatures, showing preparation for another breach. It may be hours, it may be days, but it will come. And when it does, ma'am," Thomas asked, Ann's expression didn't waver, "we will be ready." But readiness requires more than systems. It requires people who understand the cost of silence, whose loyalty is not for show, but for duty. She stepped closer. "Hail, you'll be reassigned temporarily to a special quiet watch rotation. Discreet observation. Zero acknowledgement. Your role is simple. Move where others don't look. Listen where others don't hear. Report only to me." Thomas felt the magnitude of her words. He had never expected this. Not in his first year. Not in his six. Not ever. Nam, I'll serve as instructed. Princess, and gave a single approving nod. Good. Then let me tell you something else, unofficially. Her voice lowered, controlled but earnest. Catherine used that code because she trusts the system, but she chose you because she trusts the people protecting it. Don't underestimate that. A faint warmth, pride, responsibility, something deeper, spread through Thomas's chest. He bowed his head. I won't fail, ma'am. I know. She walked to the window overlooking the quiet evening courtyard, the golden light reflecting faintly off the ancient glass. History remembers kings and queens, she said, but the walls remember the ones who kept them standing. There was no ceremony after that moment, no formal dismissal, just a quiet nod from a man, signaling the conversation had ended. Thomas stepped out into the corridor, the doors closing softly behind him. The palace felt different now, not quieter, not heavier, more aware. Lights glowed against the stone. Guards shifted subtly. Staff walked with more purpose. A system invisible to the public had awakened fully. Thomas walked through the castle with a new understanding. He wasn't just guarding a building. He wasn't just guarding traditions. He was guarding a legacy, woven through centuries, protected by those who served with silent resolve. And now, he was part of that legacy. As he reached the courtyard, he glanced back at the great windows of the upper floors. Somewhere inside, Princess Kate had sparked the chain of protection. Somewhere inside, Princess and was preparing the next step. Somewhere inside, an intruder waited for another chance. And somewhere inside, Thomas Hale, the quiet guard, the overlook protector, was ready for them. Whatever came next, the palace would not face it unaware. The code had done its job. Now it was his turn. The palace would stand. And so would he.